Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Our first story is titled,
My wife's family secretly spied on us and tried to control our marriage. My name's Nate, and this is the wild tale of how my in-laws turned into amateur spies and tried to micromanage my marriage. I met my wife, Joan, at a friend's barbecue 5 years ago. It was one of those perfect summer days. Cold beers, hot dogs on the grill, and laughter floating through the air. Joan walked in with a bowl of homemade potato salad, and I was instantly smitten. She had this radiant smile that lit up her whole face, and when our eyes met across the yard, I felt a jolt of electricity. We hit it off immediately, talking and joking for hours. By the end of the night, I had her number and a promise for a coffee date the following week. That date turned into dinner, which turned into weekend trips, which eventually led to me getting down on one knee 2 years later. Our wedding was a small, intimate affair. Just close friends and family gathered in a rustic barn venue. Joan looked stunning in her flowing white dress, and I'll never forget the moment she walked down the aisle towards me. Her parents, Tony and Pauline, beamed with pride as they gave their daughter away. At the time, I thought I had hit the in-law jackpot. Tony and Pauline seemed warm, welcoming, and genuinely happy to have me join the family. They hosted a beautiful rehearsal dinner, made heartfelt speeches at the reception, and even surprised us with a generous check to put towards a down payment on our first home. "Welcome to the family, son," Tony had said, clapping me on the back. We couldn't be happier that Joan found such a good man. If only I had known then what was lurking beneath that friendly face. The first few months of marriage were blissful. Joan and I settled into our new home, a cozy 2-bedroom house in a quiet suburb. We spent our weekends exploring our new neighborhood, trying out local restaurants, and slowly turning our house into a home. It felt like we were building our own little haven, just the two of us against the world. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flags earlier, but when you're newly married and stupidly in love, it's easy to overlook things that don't quite add up. It started small. Pauline would call Joan every single day, sometimes multiple times. At first, I thought it was so sweet, a mother staying close with her daughter, but the conversations always seemed to revolve around our daily lives, what we had for dinner, where we went on the weekend, even mundane details like what time I left for work. When I mentioned how often they talked, Joan brushed it off. "Mom's just interested in our lives," she'd say. "She misses having me around the house." Then came the surprise visits. Tony and Pauline lived an hour away, but they started showing up at our doorstep unannounced every other weekend. They bring groceries, claiming they were in the neighborhood and thought we could use some fresh produce, or they'd show up with cleaning supplies, insisting on helping us tidy up the house. It was during one of these surprise visits that I first got the feeling something wasn't quite right. I had come home early from work with a pounding headache, looking forward to a quiet afternoon nap. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed Tony's car parked on the street. Thinking Joan must have invited her parents over, I headed inside, but the scene I walked in on stopped me in my tracks. Tony was in our home office, hunched over my laptop with a furrowed brow. Pauline was riffling through a stack of mail on my desk. They jumped when I cleared my throat, looking like kids caught with their hands in the cookie jar. They fumbled through an explanation about helping Joan organize things, claiming she had stepped out for coffee. When I asked about their key, Pauline breezily mentioned that Joan had given them a spare for emergencies. Something about their explanation didn't sit right with me, but I was too shocked and frankly too confused to push the issue. I retreated to the bedroom, my mind racing. When Joan got home, I told her what I'd seen. To my surprise, she didn't seem concerned at all, brushing it off as her parents being overprotective. I wanted to believe her, but that nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. From that day on, I started paying closer attention to Tony and Pauline's behavior, and boy, did I not like what I found. It seemed like they always knew our schedule. If we went out to dinner, Pauline would call the next day asking how we enjoyed the new Italian place in town, even if we hadn't told her where we were going. If I worked late, Tony would make an offhand comment about the project I was stuck on. At first, I chalked it up to Joan sharing details of our lives with him. But when I asked her about it, she seemed just as puzzled as I was. The instances of privacy invasion started to pile up. One day, I came home to find Pauline rearranging our bedroom closet, claiming she was just helping us get organized. Another time, Tony showed up at my office unannounced, saying he was in the area and wanted to take me to lunch. He spent the entire meal asking probing questions about my work, my colleagues, and my career plans. Things got even weirder when Joan and I decided to take a romantic weekend getaway. We hadn't told anyone about our plans, wanting to keep it as a private couples retreat. Yet somehow, when we checked into our hotel, there was a gift basket waiting for us from Tony and Pauline. The card said they hoped we enjoyed our stay at the lakeside resort. We were baffled and more than a little creeped out. The invasion of our digital lives was equally disturbing. I started noticing strange activity on my social media accounts, friend requests from people I didn't know, but who were all connected to Tony and Pauline. Posts I had set to friends only were somehow being discussed by Joan's extended family. It was as if our digital walls were made of glass and Tony and Pauline had a front row seat to our online lives. One particularly unsettling incident occurred when Joan and I had a small argument over text. It was nothing major, just a miscommunication about dinner plans. But the next day, Pauline called Joan full of concern about our relationship troubles. When Joan asked how she knew about our tiff, Pauline fumbled through an excuse about mother's intuition. The final straw came about 6 months into our marriage. Joan and I had been trying for a baby, but we hadn't told anyone yet. We wanted it to be our little secret until we had good news to share. One Sunday afternoon, Pauline called while Joan was in the shower. I picked up, planning to take a message. To my shock, Pauline asked about Joan's morning sickness, clearly assuming we were already expecting. When I confronted her, she quickly backpedaled and hung up. That was the moment I knew something was seriously wrong. How did Pauline possibly know we were trying for a baby? We hadn't told a soul. When I explained the phone call to Joan, her face went from confused to shocked to angry. We spent the next week turning into amateur detectives in our own home, searching for evidence of how her parents could have such detailed knowledge of our private lives. Our search turned up more than we ever expected. We found a small network monitoring device plugged into our router, capable of tracking all our internet activity. There was a hidden camera disguised as a smoke detector in our bedroom. We discovered spyware installed on both our phones and laptops. They even had a GPS tracker on my car. But the violations didn't stop there. As we dug deeper, we uncovered even more disturbing evidence of Tony and Pauline's obsession with controlling our lives. We found a small notebook hidden in a potted plant. Pauline must have forgotten it during one of her cleaning visits. It was filled with detailed notes about our daily routines, from what time we left for work to what we ate for dinner. There were even notes about our more intimate moments, which made my skin crawl. In our home office, we discovered a hidden voice-activated recorder taped under the desk. It had captured hours of our private conversations, including discussions about our finances, our future plans, and even some playful private moments between Joan and me. Perhaps most disturbingly, we found evidence that Tony had been using his connections at the bank where he worked to monitor our financial transactions. There were printouts of our bank statements, credit card bills, and even a copy of our mortgage application. The extent of their spying was overwhelming. They had effectively turned our home into a surveillance state, with every aspect of our lives under constant scrutiny. As we uncovered each new violation, I watched Joan's face crumble a little more. This was her parents, the people who were supposed to love and support us unconditionally. Instead, they have violated our trust in the most fundamental way. We decided to confront them, inviting Tony and Pauline over for dinner the following Saturday. The days leading up to the confrontation were tense. Joan was quiet and withdrawn, struggling to come to terms with her parents' betrayal. I was angry, but trying to stay strong for Joan's sake. When Saturday rolled around, I was a bundle of nerves. We sat through an awkward dinner, Tony and Pauline oblivious to the storm that was about to break. As Pauline was mid-sentence about her book club, Joan suddenly couldn't take it anymore. "How could you?" she said, her voice low and trembling with anger. Tony and Pauline exchanged confused glances, but their guilty expressions gave them away. We laid out all the evidence we had found, watching as their faces drained of color. Tony tried to defend his actions, claiming they were just trying to protect Joan. "We worry about you, sweetheart," he said. "We just wanted to make sure you were safe and happy." But Joan wasn't having it. "Safe? Happy?" she cried. "By violating our privacy? By treating us like criminals? How is reading our private conversations and watching us in our bedroom supposed to make us happy?" I couldn't hold back my anger either. "We're adults," I said firmly. "We don't need you monitoring our every move. What you've done isn't just morally wrong, it's illegal." Pauline burst into tears while Tony became defensive. You don't understand," he insisted. "We've always been involved in Joan's life. We're just trying to stay connected." "Connected?" I snapped. "You've got a funny way of showing it. Spyware, hidden cameras, GPS trackers. That's not being connected. That's being controlling and obsessive." The confrontation was emotional and messy. Pauline cried, Tony got defensive, and Joan alternated between fury and heartbreak. We showed them every piece of evidence we had found, forcing them to face the extent of their actions. When we brought out the notebook with the detailed logs of our daily lives, Pauline broke down completely. "I just wanted to know what was happening in your life," she sobbed. "You used to tell me everything, Joan. I felt like I was losing you." Joan's voice was steel when she replied, "You have lost me, Mom, you and Dad both. I don't know if I ever trust you again." Tony tried one last time to justify their actions. "We just love you so much, sweetheart. Everything we did was out of love." "No," I interjected. "This isn't love. Love is based on trust and respect. What you've done is a violation of both." In the end, we asked them to leave, telling them we needed time to process everything and decide what to do next. As they walked out the door, Joan's voice stopped them. "Don't contact us," she said. "We'll reach out if we're ready to talk." The next few weeks were tough. Joan alternated between bouts of anger and periods of deep sadness. We had long talks about trust, family, and what we wanted for our future. We also had to deal with the practical aspects, changing all our passwords, getting our devices professional cleaned of spyware, and installing a new security system that we controlled. We even went so far as to have our house professionally swept for any remaining listening devices or cameras. The technician found 2 more hidden microphones that we had missed in our initial search, one in the living room and one in the kitchen. Each new discovery felt like a fresh violation. Tony and Pauline tried to contact us multiple times, leaving tearful voicemails and sending lengthy emails full of apologies. We ignored them all, needing time and space to heal. During this time, Joan and I grew even closer. We started seeing a couples therapist to help us navigate the complex emotions and trust issues that had arisen. We also threw ourselves into home improvement projects, painting rooms and building furniture together as a way to reclaim our space. One particularly difficult evening, about 3 weeks after the confrontation, Joan broke down in tears while we were making dinner. I just don't understand, she sobbed. How could they do this to us? I feel like my whole childhood was a lie. I held her close, feeling helpless in the face of her pain. I don't know, honey, I said softly, but we'll get through this together. We're stronger than their betrayal. That night, we made a pact to always be honest with each other, no matter what. We promised to face any challenges as a team, united against whatever life might throw at us. It was about a month after the confrontation that Joan finally felt ready to talk to her parents again. We invited them to meet us at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop in town. The conversation was tense and emotional. Tony and Pauline apologized profusely, swearing they had removed all the spying equipment and promising never to invade our privacy again. Joan, still hurt but wanting to salvage some kind of relationship with her parents, laid down some ground rules. No more surprise visits, she said firmly. You call before coming over, and we have the right to say no. No more daily phone calls. We'll reach out when we want to talk. And if we ever find out you're spying on us again, we're done for good. Tony and Pauline agreed readily, looking relieved that we were even willing to give them another chance. I made my position clear as well, emphasizing that I would always put Joan and our marriage first. The months that followed were a process of slow healing and rebuilding trust. We started with short, supervised visits in public places. Gradually, as Tony and Pauline proved they could respect our boundaries, we allowed them back into our home for brief dinners or afternoon teas. There were setbacks along the way. Once we caught Pauline trying to sneak a peek at Joan's phone when she thought no one was looking. Another time, Tony made a comment that suggested he knew about a work issue I hadn't mentioned to anyone but Joan. Each time we confronted them immediately and reminded them of the consequences if they violated our trust again. Despite these hiccups, things slowly improved. Tony and Pauline seemed to genuinely realize the harm they had caused and work hard to regain our trust. They started seeing a therapist of their own, working through their control issues and learning to respect boundaries. As our relationship with Joan's parents slowly mended, we focused on strengthening our own bond as a couple. We took a romantic weekend getaway, just the two of us, to a cozy bed and breakfast in the mountains. Away from the stress and drama, we reconnected and reaffirmed our love and commitment to each other. We also started planning for our future in earnest. We had put our baby plans on hold during the whole ordeal, but now we felt ready to try again. We transformed the spare room into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and assembling the crib together. 6 months after the confrontation, we got the news we've been hoping for. Joan was pregnant. We were overjoyed but also apprehensive about how this would change our family dynamic. We decided to wait a while before telling Tony and Pauline, wanting to savor this special time just between the two of us. When we finally did share the news at a small family dinner we hosted, Tony and Pauline were ecstatic, but we could see them holding back, clearly afraid of overstepping. It was a bittersweet moment, joy at the prospect of becoming grandparents, tinged with the lingering effects of their past action. We set clear boundaries from the start about their role as grandparents. No surprise visits, no undermining our parenting decisions, and absolutely no spying on their grandchild. They agreed without hesitation, eager to be part of their grandchild's life on any terms we set. As Joan's pregnancy progressed, we faced new challenges. Morning sickness hit her hard, and there were days when she could barely get out of bed. I took time off work to care for her, and to my surprise, Pauline offered to help without being pushy or intrusive. Drop off ginger tea and crackers, respecting our space but letting us know she was there if we needed anything. We also had to navigate the tricky waters of pregnancy advice. Both Pauline and my mother were full of suggestions, some helpful and some outdated. We learned to listen politely but make our own decisions, always consulting with our doctor for medical advice. The day our daughter was born was the happiest of our lives. Holding her for the first time, I felt a love I never knew was possible. Joan was radiant, exhausted but beaming with joy. When Tony and Pauline came to visit in the hospital, I saw genuine tears in her eyes as they held their granddaughter for the first time. In that moment, watching them coo over our daughter, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could build a new kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect and trust. The first few months with our new baby were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and overwhelming love. Tony and Pauline were supportive but respectful, always calling before visiting and never overstaying their welcome. They seemed to have truly taken our boundaries to heart. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset while our daughter napped, Joan turned to me with a soft smile. "You know," she said, "I think we're going to be okay, all of us." Looking back on this whole crazy experience, I've learned a lot about the importance of trust, about standing up for yourself and your relationship, and about the complicated nature of family love. It hasn't been easy, but Joan and I have come out stronger on the other side. To anyone out there dealing with overbearing in-laws or family members who don't respect boundaries, stand your ground. Your privacy, your relationship, and your peace of mind are worth fighting for. It might be uncomfortable, it might cause conflict, but in the end, it's the only way to build a healthy, respectful family dynamic. As for Joan and me, we're looking forward to the future, raising our daughter in a home full of love, trust, and respect, to building our own family traditions, and to teaching our little one the importance of privacy, boundaries, and standing up for what's right. Who knows what challenges we'll face as parents, but whatever comes our way, I know we'll face it together because that's what real family does. They support each other, respect each other, and love each other unconditionally. No spying required. Here are my thoughts about the story. Let me tell you, I've read some crazy stories on this channel, but this one takes the cake, frosting and all. I mean, hidden cameras in the bedroom, GPS trackers, spyware on their phones. It's like Tony and Pauline watched way too many spy movies and thought, "Hey, that looks like fun. Let's do that to our daughter and son-in-law." Seriously, what were they thinking? You know what tripped me up the most, though? It's how they tried to justify it all with love. Like, come on, Tony and Pauline, there's helicopter parenting and then there's straight up stalking. You guys crossed the line so far back, you can't see it anymore. But here's the thing that really hit me in the feels. Throughout this whole ordeal, Nate and Joan stuck together like glue. I mean, imagine finding out your in-laws have been spying on your most intimate moments. That's the kind of thing that could tear a couple apart, right? I mean, I've seen more than my fair share of couples that get torn up because one person would die on the hill of defending their parents and not their significant other. But these two, they turned into a freaking dynamic duo, sweeping the house for bugs like they're the stars of their own spy thriller. And Joan, man, my heart went out to her. Can you imagine having to confront your own parents about something like this? The betrayal, the hurt, the anger, I could practically feel it through the screen. But the way she stood her ground, that's the kind of strength I aspire to have. Now let's talk about the reconciliation process because that was a roller coaster in itself. At first I was like, no way, cut them off forever. But as I kept reading, I started to appreciate how Nate and Joan handled it. They didn't just forgive and forget. They set boundaries harder than a bouncer at an exclusive club. And you know what? That's some real adult stuff right there. You can find and make a family of your own. Yes, but your blood-born family is one of a kind. There's a reason there's such a push to give off offending family members so many second chances. I gotta say though, the part that really got me invested was when their daughter was born. There's something about a baby that can change everything, you know? When Nate described Tony and Pauline holding her for the first time, I could almost see those walls starting to crumble. It's like in that moment they remembered what family is really about. But here's my hot take. While it's great that they're working things out, Nate and Joan better stay vigilant. I mean, old habits die hard, right? I'd be checking every stuffed animal in that nursery for hidden cameras, just saying. All half jokes aside, though, this story really made me think about trust and boundaries in families. It's so easy to cross lines when we think we're doing it for love, but real love is about respect. It's about trusting the people you care about to live their own lives. In the end, I'm rooting for Nate, Joan, and their little daughter. Heck, I'm even rooting for Tony and Pauline to keep learning and growing. Because that's what life's all about, isn't it? Learning from our mistakes, growing as people, and hopefully not instilling spyware on our kids' phones.
And now, guys, we will move on to the second story of the video. Please like the video if you have enjoyed it so far. The story starts like this.
My wife's ex tried to use our kids as pawns to get back at us. Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be sharing a story like this, but here we are. I'm James, 38 years old, and I've been married to my wonderful wife, Taylor, for almost a decade now. We have two amazing kids together, Emma, who's 8, and Lucas, who's 6. Life was pretty good for us, or so I thought, until Taylor's ex-husband decided to throw a wrench into our happy family dynamic. Some background. Taylor was married to her ex, Brian, for about 5 years before I came into the picture. Their marriage had been rocky from the start, with Brian being controlling and manipulative. They had Emma together, but their relationship deteriorated quickly after her birth. Taylor finally found the courage to leave him when Emma was about 2 years old. I met Taylor about a year after her divorce was finalized. We hit it off immediately, and I fell in love not just with her, but with little Emma too. We dated for a couple of years before getting married, and Lucas came along not long after. Brian had visitation rights with Emma, but he was never really consistent with them. He'd show up for a few weekends, then disappear for months at a time. Despite Brian's inconsistency, Taylor always tried to keep things civil for Emma's sake. She never badmouthed him in front of the kids and always encouraged Emma to have a relationship with her dad. I followed her lead, treating Brian with polite indifference on the rare occasions we interacted. Things were relatively peaceful for years. Brian would pop in and out of Emma's life, but it never caused too much disruption. Emma was always happy to see him, but she was equally content at home with us. Lucas, being too young to really understand the situation, just accepted that Emma sometimes went to visit her other dad. But about 6 months ago, everything changed. Brian suddenly became very interested in being a part of Emma's life. At first, we were cautiously optimistic. Maybe he had finally realized what he'd been missing and wanted to step up as a father. Taylor and I agreed that it would be good for Emma to have a stronger relationship with her biological dad. However, it quickly became apparent that Brian had ulterior motives. He started filling Emma's head with all sorts of ideas during their visits. He'd tell her how much he missed her and Taylor and how they should be a family again. He'd make snide comments about me, implying that I wasn't her real dad and that I was trying to replace him. Emma, being only 8, was understandably confused and upset by all of this. She'd come home from visits with Brian and ask Taylor questions like, "Mom, why don't you love Dad anymore?" Or, "Why can't we all live together?" It broke our hearts to see her struggling with these complex emotions that she was too young to fully understand. Things came to a head one Sunday evening when I was picking Emma up from Brian's place. As Emma was getting into the car, Brian approached me with a smug grin on his face. "You know, James," he said in his voice dripping with fake friendliness, "Emma's been asking a lot of questions about her real family lately. I think she's starting to realize where she truly belongs." I felt my blood boiling, but I kept my cool for Emma's sake. "Brian, Emma knows exactly where she belongs, with her family, all of her family." Brian's grin turned into a sneer. We'll see about that. Blood is thicker than water after all. As I drove home with Emma, my mind was racing. I knew we had to do something about this situation, but I wasn't sure what. I didn't want to stoop to Brian's level and start bad-mouthing him to Emma, but I also couldn't stand by and watch him manipulate our daughter like this. When we got home, I pulled Taylor aside and told her about my interaction with Brian. She was furious, but like me, she was at a loss for what to do. We agreed to sleep on it and discuss our options in the morning. The next morning, Taylor and I sat down to discuss the situation over coffee. We were both exhausted, having tossed and turned all night, worrying about Emma. "We need to talk to Emma," Taylor said, her voice filled with concern. "We have to make sure she knows that she's loved and that her family is right here." I nodded in agreement, but we also need to be careful not to put her in the middle of this. She's too young to deal with adult problems. We called Emma into the living room and sat her down between us on the couch. Lucas was at a friend's house for a play date, so we had some privacy to talk. "Emma, sweetheart," Taylor began gently, "we wanted to talk to you about your visits with your dad. How are you feeling about them?" Emma fidgeted with the hem of her shirt, not meeting our eyes. "They're okay, I guess," she mumbled. I placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It's okay if you're feeling confused or upset about anything. You can always talk to us." Emma looked up at us and began talking about how Taylor didn't love her dad anymore and continued on about how they weren't really a family anymore. It was heartbreaking to listen to, and I could see Taylor was fighting back tears of her own. She pulled Emma into a tight hug. "Oh, sweetie," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We are family. You, me, James, and Lucas. We are all family, and your dad is part of your family too, just in a different way." I chimed in, trying to keep my voice steady. "Emma, sometimes grown-ups' feelings for each other change, but that doesn't change how much we love you. Your mom and I love you so much, and so does your dad." Emma sniffed, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "But Dad says James isn't my real dad. He says he's trying to replace him." My heart clenched at her words, but I took a deep breath from responding. "Emma, I might not be your biological father, but I love you just as much as if you were my own. I'm not trying to replace your dad. You have enough love in your heart for both of us." We spent the next hour talking with Emma, reassuring her of our love and trying to explain the complicated situation in terms she could understand. By the end of the conversation, she seemed more settled, but I knew this was far from over. As the weeks went by, Brian's behavior became increasingly erratic and manipulative. He started demanding more time with Emma, often trying to encroach on our family plans. He'd call at all hours, insisting on talking to Emma, even when she was asleep or busy with homework. One particularly frustrating incident occurred when we had planned a family trip to Disneyland for Lucas's birthday. We had been saving up for months, and both kids were incredibly excited. 2 days before we set up to leave, Brian called. "I need Emma this weekend," he declared without preamble. "Brian, you know we have the trip to Disneyland planned," Taylor replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "We told you about it weeks ago." "Well, plans change," Brian said dismissively. "I'm her father, and I have a right to see her. You can take her to Disneyland another time." Taylor took a deep breath. "Brian, we're not changing our plans. This trip is for Lucas's birthday, and Emma is looking forward to it too. Your next scheduled weekend with her is in 2 weeks. Brian's voice turned cold. "You can't keep my daughter from me. If you try to take her out of state without my permission, I'll call the police and report it as kidnapping." Taylor was shaking with anger as she hung up the phone. We spent the next hour on the phone with our lawyer, making sure we were within our rights to take Emma on the trip. Fortunately, our custody agreement allowed for out-of-state travel with proper notice, which we had given. The trip went ahead as planned, but it was marred by constant calls and texts from Brian. He called Emma multiple times a day, guilt-tripping her for going on the trip and trying to make her feel bad for having fun without him. It broke my heart to see the conflict on Emma's face every time her phone rang. As if the situation with Emma wasn't stressful enough, Brian started trying to involve Lucas in his schemes as well. Despite having no biological connection to Lucas, Brian began referring to himself as Lucas's other dad and insisting that Lucas call him Papa Brian. Lucas, being younger and not fully understanding the situation, was initially excited by the idea of having another dad, but Brian's erratic behavior and constant presence began to confuse and upset him too. One afternoon, I picked Lucas up from the school to find him in tears. His teacher pulled me aside, looking concerned. "Mr. Thompson, Lucas had a bit of a meltdown today," she explained gently. "During our family drawing activity, he became very upset and started crying, saying he didn't know how to draw his family because he had too many dads." I felt a surge of anger towards Brian, but I pushed it down, focusing on comforting my son. "Lucas, you only have one dad, and that's me. Emma's dad is just a friend of the family. You don't need to call him dad or draw him in your family pictures if you don't want to." As we drove home, I couldn't help but feel that this situation was spiraling out of control. Brian's attempts to manipulate our children were causing real emotional damage, and it was clear that something needed to be done. That evening, after the kids were in bed, Taylor and I had a long, serious discussion about our options. We both agreed that we needed to take more decisive action to protect our children from Brian's manipulative behavior. "I think we need to go back to court," Taylor said, her voice filled with determination. "We need to get the custody agreement modified. Brian's behavior is hurting the kids, and we have to put a stop to it." I nodded in agreement. "You're right. We've tried to be accommodating for Emma's sake, but Brian has taken advantage of that. It's time to set some firm boundaries." The next day, we contacted our lawyer and began the process of filing for a modification of the custody agreement. We documented every instance of Brian's inappropriate behavior, from his attempts to alienate Emma from us to his confusion of Lucas. As we prepared for the legal battle ahead, we knew it wasn't going to be easy. Brian wasn't going to give up without a fight, and we were worried about the toll this would take on our family. But we were determined to do whatever it took to protect our children and preserve the stability of our home. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal consultations, document gatherings, and tense phone calls. We did our best to shield Emma and Lucas from distress, but kids are perceptive. They could tell something was wrong. Once I had to reassure Emma at night because she worried about everyone being mad at each other because of her. As I left her room, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and sadness. Our children shouldn't have to worry about these adult problems. They should be focused on being kids, not caught in the middle of a custody battle. The situation took an unexpected turn about a week later. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was at work when I got a frantic call from Lucas's school. "Mr. Thompson," the school secretary said, her voice tense, "we had a situation here with Lucas. A man claiming to be his father tried to pick him up from school. When we refused, he became agitated. The police have been called." My heart dropped into my stomach. "I'm on my way," I said, already grabbing my keys and rushing out of the office. I called Taylor on my way to school, and she said she'd meet me there. When I arrived, there were 2 police cars in the parking lot. I rushed into the office to find a visibly shaken Lucas clinging to his teacher, and Brian arguing loudly with the principal and a police officer. "This is ridiculous," Brian was shouting. "I'm his father. I have every right to pick him up." The police officer was trying to calm him down. "Sir, you're not listed as an authorized pickup for this child. We need you to leave the premises immediately." Brian's face contorted with rage when he saw me. "You!" he spat. "You're trying to keep my children away from me." I ignored him, focusing on comforting Lucas. Taylor arrived a few moments later, and the police officer took us aside to get our statement. We explained the situation, that Brian was Emma's biological father, but had no legal connection to Lucas, and that he had been exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior. The officer nodded sympathetically and assured us they would handle the situation. Brian was escorted off the school grounds, but not before shouting threats and accusations at us. "This isn't over," he yelled as the police led him away. "Those are my kids, and I'll prove it." The incident at the school was the last straw. Our lawyer advised us to file for an emergency custody hearing and a restraining order. The paperwork was filed the next day. The weeks leading up to the hearing were tense. Brian continued his campaign of manipulation, now extending to social media. He started posting long, rambling messages about parental alienation and father's rights, painting himself as the victim and us as the villains keeping him from his children. Some of our mutual acquaintances, not knowing the full story, started reaching out with concern. "Are you really keeping Brian from seeing his kids?" one of Taylor's old college friends messaged her. "That seems really cruel." Taylor was devastated by the accusations. "I've always encouraged Emma to have a relationship with Brian," she told me one night, tears in her eyes. "How can people believe I would keep them apart?" I held her close, trying to comfort her. "People who know us know the truth," I assured her, "and the court will see through Brian's lies." Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. We dropped the kids off with Taylor's parents, not wanting them to be present for what promised to be a stressful and potentially ugly proceeding. As we walked into the courthouse, we saw Brian standing outside with a small group of people holding signs about fathers' rights. He had apparently rallied some sort of support group. My stomach churned at the sight, but Taylor squeezed my hand reassuringly. "We have the truth on our side," she whispered. "That's what matters." The hearing was grueling. Brian's lawyer painted a picture of him as a devoted father, being kept from his children by a vindictive ex-wife and her new husband. They brought up Taylor's past struggles with postpartum depression after Emma's birth, implying that she was an unfit mother. Our lawyer, thankfully, was prepared. She presented a mountain of evidence, text messages, emails, witness statements from teachers and neighbors, all documenting Brian's erratic behavior and attempts to manipulate the children. She also brought up his years of inconsistent visitation and failure to pay child support. The most damning evidence came in the form of a recording. Unbeknownst to Brian, he had left a long, rambling voicemail on our home phone late one night, clearly intoxicated. In the message, he ranted about getting revenge on Taylor for leaving him and how he was going to use the kids to make her pay. As the recording played in the courtroom, I saw the judge's expression grow increasingly stern as she listened. After several hours of testimony and arguments, the judge called a recess to consider her decision. Taylor and I waited anxiously in the hallway, holding hands and trying to stay calm. When we were called back in, the judge's decision was clear and firm. She granted our request for a modified custody agreement, severely limiting Brian's access to Emma and putting strict conditions on his visitations. She also granted a restraining order, preventing him from coming near our home or the children's schools. The judge addressed Brian sternly. "Your behavior has demonstrated a clear disregard for the well-being of these children. Until you can show significant improvement and adherence to the court's orders, your access to Emma will be limited to supervised visitations. And let me be very clear, you have no legal rights to Lucas Thompson. Any attempts to contact him or represent yourself as his father will be considered a violation of this order." Brian's face was a mix of shock and anger. He started to protest, but his lawyer quickly silenced him. As we left the courthouse, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't a perfect solution, and I knew we had a long road ahead, but it felt like a significant step towards protecting our family. As we walked into the house to call Taylor's parents and arrange to pick up the kids, I felt cautiously optimistic about our future. We had won this battle, but I knew the war wasn't over. Brian wasn't likely to give up easily, and we would need to stay vigilant. But looking at the photos of our happy, smiling family lining the hallway, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our love for each other and for our children would see us through. We had protected our kids from being used as pawns in Brian's revenge scheme, and we would continue to fight to give them the stable, loving home they deserved. It wouldn't always be easy, but it would always be worth it. As we hear the excited voices of Emma and Lucas every day, Taylor and I share a smile every time. Whatever the future holds, we're ready to face it as a family. Here are my thoughts about the story. First off, let's talk about James and Taylor. These two are absolute heroes in my book. The amount of patience and love they showed throughout this whole ordeal is seriously impressive. I mean, can you imagine trying to navigate all that drama while still maintaining a stable home for your kids? It's like trying to juggle flaming chainsaws while riding a unicycle on a tightrope. Mad respect. Now, on to Brian. Oh boy, where do I even start with this guy? You know, I've dealt with some petty exes in my time, but this dude takes the cake, frosting, and the whole dang bakery. Using your own kid as a pawn in your own revenge scheme? That's a new low, my friends. And then trying to weasel his way into Lucas's life too? Nuh-uh, not cool, Brian, not cool at all. I mean, you weren't even related to him. What would you even try to pull in court with that? What really got me fuming, though, was the scene at Lucas's school. I mean, who does that? Showing up and trying to take a kid that's not even yours? That's not just crossing a line, that's pole vaulting over it and then setting the pole on fire. I swear my blood pressure was through the roof during that part, but you know what? As infuriating as Brian's behavior was, I couldn't help but feel a tiny bit sorry for that guy. Don't get me wrong, he's still a grade A jerk, but imagine being so consumed by bitterness and the need for revenge that you'd hurt your own child. That's a special kind of messed up, and it makes me wonder what kind of baggage he's carrying around. There's something to try to feel compassionate for there, and I hope that he'll seek out and get the help he needs. The real stars of this story, though? Those kids, Emma and Lucas. Can you imagine how confusing and scary this must have been for them? Especially Emma, being pulled between her dad and the family she knows and loves, and poor Lucas suddenly having this strange man trying to be his other dad. Kids are resilient, but man, that's a lot for a little one to process. When people say that kids can bounce back from the worst of things, they mean that with the expectation that their support network will help. Kids are just as fragile, if not significantly more fragile, than adults, and traumatizing them like this was such a bad move by Brian. I gotta say, the part that really got me was when Emma was just so conflicted about the whole thing. That just broke my heart. No child should ever have to feel responsible for adult problems like that, whether it's splitting parents, arguing friends, or anything else. That feeling of being caught in the middle, it sticks with you. But let's talk about that courtroom scene for a sec. Is it wrong that I got a little satisfaction out of Brian's face going pale when they played that voicemail? I mean, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, am I right? And can we give a round of applause to James and Taylor's lawyer? Talk about coming prepared. That's the kind of person you want in your corner when the chips are down. You know, stories like this really make you think about the impact of divorce on kids. It's easy to get caught up in your own hurt and anger, but at the end of the day, it's the children who suffered the most. James and Taylor did an amazing job of putting the kids first, even when it would have been so easy to stoop to Brian's level. It gives me a lot of hope for the kids' futures, and I think we can all assume they lived out a cliche but beautiful happily ever after. Hopefully, probably.
Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again tomorrow.